Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes. We are with Mister Eclipse, our Dominator, who's level 33. We have 300 and some thousand XP to go to get to level 34. We're 2 beads into it, and we're on the story arc for corporate culture for Philip and Moreau. So we're fighting the Cray, and I thought I would bring you back and let's see, where are we going here? Let's go this way. I thought I would bring you back and give you a bit of a video today. I actually did a rant right before this yesterday for this level, and I wasn't really happy with it. I feel like it was just all over the place. I was just having trouble getting out the words of what I wanted to talk about, and I decided, you know what, it was too close to something I had talked about before. So let's actually talk about a couple of other things. So today we're going to talk about is the potential option for the future of this channel once we get done with this series of Mister Eclipse. And the other is going to be some DMing advice that I saw on the internet. So let's start with kind of the future of the channel, because I think that that's probably the most important thing. And then we will get into GMing mistakes that you might be making without realizing it. And we'll talk about what I think of those, and so we'll get into those two things. But before we do that, let's take a look at where we are with our character. I have finished enhancing life drain. I added a slot to Nightfall, and I added a slot to Umber Beast because our Umber Beast is our buddy now. And where notoriety is +1 and seems to be working okay. The main problem I'm having is miss streaks. Oh, they're horrible against orange and reds, even with accuracy enhanced powers, and especially this thing loves to miss. Even when I have an 80% chance, 78% chance to hit, it'll miss 2, 3, 4 times in a row. Now, obviously, there are other hits going in between, right? Because when you target somebody and you use this teleport foe to move them and you miss, they often detect it and come after you anyway, so it does the pull either way, although sometimes they bring a companion along when you do that. But they might have brought a companion along if you teleported them anyway. So it serves its purpose either way, but then, the next time I try it and miss again, next time I try it, misses again. So miss streaks have been a real problem with this guy. The other problem I've had with missing is when this one misses, and this one is as enhanced as it can be, guys. This has got a single origin, got a invention set on it, so it can't be any better. And we've got tons of accuracy on it, and even at 85, 90%, I'll miss a lieutenant that I'm trying to hold 3 times. And if you do that, it's a good way to get smacked. Haven't died, but yeah, so this guy's a boss, so we're going to probably want our pets. We don't have our domination up, of course. Let's go ahead and put on break free because they might try to mez me. And I'm also going to hit him with these things. So we have the 2 Kellermans to rescue, and so there's going to be a lot of running around in this particular mission, but that's okay. So let's talk first about the future of the channel. Wow, are you kidding me? Kellerman's right here. Let's talk first about the future of the channel and what I want to be doing in the future. So one of the things I had experimented with, as you may have seen, is posting some videos of Ark Survival Ascended. I made a whole bunch of videos, but I only posted 4. That's because after posting the 4, I saw that really nobody was commenting on those. Hardly anybody was watching them. Wow, this is lucky. Halfway through the mission already. Hardly anybody was watching them. Nobody was liking them. Nobody was commenting. And look, I'm not one who cares about likes and comments and all of that stuff, but I think it's probably silly for me to keep posting videos nobody wants to watch. So it's pretty clear that the people on this channel who have been watching, right, these videos come out and a lot more people watch them than watch the Ark ones. So it's pretty clear that this is along the lines of what people want to watch, and Ark isn't. And I can understand that. I don't do any off-topic ranting in Ark generally because it requires a lot more attention from me in order not to die than this game does, although this game requires more as a Dominator than it does as a Stalker or a Scrapper. Still, I can see why people might not want to watch me play that, and I'm not the best Ark player in the world anyway, and I mess up a lot, and so, yeah, I have a whole bunch of videos in the hopper that I haven't posted because doesn't seem to be of interest to folks, and that's fine. My feelings aren't hurt. It was an experiment, didn't work. I'm fine with that, no problem. But we then have to figure out what, if anything, I'm going to do on this channel once we're done with this character, because I really can't see regularly posting City of Heroes content after I'm done with this character. I mean, I can maybe see going back to doing a Let's Rant and posting things when it occurs to me to rant about them, but I feel like so much of what I would rant about we've already covered frequently more than once on this channel, sometimes 2 or 3 times, that it just seems to me like I can't imagine how many more rant videos I'm going to make. Even if you allow the fact that Wizards of the Coast are a bunch of boneheads, and they're extremely likely, ouch, another boss, they're extremely likely to do things that are going to be rant worthy. Even if you allow for that fact, the reality is that I honestly don't care about anything Wizards of the Coast does at this point, because I'm not playing Dungeons & Dragons, I'm not running Dungeons & Dragons, and I don't have anything really to do with Dungeons & Dragons. I'll talk a little bit about that too, by the way, and that will have to do with what my group is doing in the future, which, as far as I can tell right now, is continuing to play Deadlands for the foreseeable future. So, as far as I can tell, I won't be playing any Wizards of the Coast games, so why would I care what they do? I hardly ever read their D&D Beyond forum anymore. I almost never visit that site. Maybe once every couple weeks I'll check it out. I don't watch D&D videos, related videos anymore. I watch general role-playing game videos, but not D&D ones, and yeah, I don't care. So without them, there'd probably be a lot less for me to rant about, because it was really often the knuckleheads on the D&D Beyond forum and or the stupid stuff that Wizards of the Coast was doing that were making me want to rant in the first place. And, you know, what's the old saying? It's amazing how good it feels. What is it? The thing about this is what I heard a long time ago. The thing about a brick wall, beating your head into a brick wall, is that it feels so good when you stop. The thing about beating your head into a brick wall is that it feels so good when you stop. I don't want to beat my head into a brick wall anymore, and it feels so good not to. Because that's what the D&D Beyond forum was, right? It was literally me beating my head into a brick wall. I can't be bothered. So I'm not reading that stuff, and therefore my prompts for the rants are going to be fewer and farther between. So I don't see that working. So the only other thing that I've been able to think of was the one other type of video that I created that seemed to get some interest by some of the folks on the channel, was when I was doing some solo role-playing Call of Cthulhu, using their sort of choose-your-own adventures type adventures, and then Ironsworn and Starforged. And I have no intention of playing Ironsworn or Starforged again at this point, at least certainly not on the channel. But I thought I could maybe return to that, and the reason I thought about it is that Luke Hart just put out a video on the DM layer about solo D&D, right, and about the different methods for doing it, and that was cool. But I've looked into that, and he was entirely talking about playing D&D solo and using something, either ChatGPT or some kind of an emulator of a GM, to emulate the GM for you so that you can play. And that would probably be my preference, but my sense of these things is that they don't actually work that well, because the problem is you need to surprise yourself as a player, and it's really hard to surprise yourself. And as Luke Hart pointed out, on one level or another, you're basically going to be creating the whole adventure anyway, right? Which is what the GM does. And that can be not very satisfying if you want to be the player and have the oracles be your GM. But I thought, what about reversing it? I've thought about this before, and I remembered that I actually have 2 books. One about, what is it called? The Solo GM's Guide or something, and the another one is, oh, I can't remember the names of them. I'll see if I can remember to post a link in the comments or something. But there are 2 short books on how to be the GM and emulate players with oracles, right, and player characters. And what I thought is this would give me the opportunity to, if not play, run existing modules, right? I could grab, if I want to play Call of Cthulhu, I could grab something like the Mansions of Madness, pull out, open an adventure, and instead of being like, how am I going to play this without spoilers? No, spoilers are fine. I'm the GM, and I could create up some player characters and see how the players interact with the adventure. So I'm not sure what system I would use. Likely Savage Worlds. I'm not sure what setting I would use. Not sure about that. But one of the ideas I have is to either run an existing adventure for myself, or maybe even a campaign if I like how it's going, and just take like the pre-made archetypes, tweak them a little bit, right? And then what these two systems do is not model character behavior so much. A little bit, yes, but model player behavior. So the one has the 6 player types he has listed as like the I don't know what you want to call it. I call him the combat wombat, right? The guy who just goes in and attacks mindlessly. The method actor, the storyteller, the power gamer, the ninja, the guy who wants to be a ninja, always wants to be a ninja in every game. And so you generate a primary, secondary, and tertiary motivation for these guys randomly, and they become players. And then you assign them a character, and then you have the player make the choices using an oracle. Are you going to do your primary, your secondary, your tertiary motivation, or a random one? And it's pretty cool. And this would enable me to see how a module plays from the perspective of a GM. It wouldn't give me a chance to play, but realistically, the parts of playing that I want to do, I kind of can't do solo anyway, right? Because it's all the role-playing stuff, the dialogue, playing out my character, interacting with the other characters. It's really hard to do solo. But as a GM, it's the kind of thing where I could actually potentially, let's say, try out some Savage Worlds adventures and see how they play and decide which one I want to give to my players based on my experience GMing for this emulated group of players. So I've been thinking about that, and if people have an interest in seeing how that works and seeing that, I would be willing to possibly post that. It's going to depend on how easy it is to make it something I can post. But the obvious thing would be if it's Savage Worlds or something like that, since they're official support in Foundry for that, play that in Foundry, and then you can see the die rolls and everything else and the character sheets and all of the rest of that. And you'll be kind of GMing along with me, and we'll go for a ride and see how the players react to our stuff. And then we could play a published module, or I could make one up, or we could create a random adventure together and then see how the fictional players play through it. So if anybody finds that interesting, drop a comment down below, let me know, and I will explore the idea of doing that. If you do find it interesting, then I would say there are some options that you should comment on as well. So one would be, what's your preferred game system? Savage Worlds is obviously one. Please don't pick D&D. I won't do it. I might be able to do Delta Green or Call of Cthulhu. I've got a bunch of adventures and stuff for those, so that's certainly possible. So if you're interested more in something like Delta Green or Call of Cthulhu, let me know. And then if it's those games, then with Delta Green, it's modern. Call of Cthulhu, you can choose from a variety of settings, but I would probably do Call of Cthulhu in the 20s. And if I was going to do modern, I would probably do Delta Green. It just makes the most sense for me. So think about those two things if you're interested in either of those. Now, if it's Savage Worlds, then we'd need to pick a setting. And I could possibly be persuaded to run Deadlands, although I think that would, much as I love Deadlands, would probably be my last choice, mostly because I'm already running it for my existing group. Although it would be cheapest to do because, heck, if you guys want to see how the Horror at Headstone Hill plays, I've already run it once. I could run it kind of for you guys, and we can, have some made-up characters, and you can see how it runs. But I've already done that, and this would kind of be a way to experience something different. Another option would be East Texas University. I would love to run. There'd be no point to me playing it because I've seen the entire Degrees of Horror campaign played out in the Wildcards ETU show on the Saving Throw channel. I would love to run that campaign since I've seen it play out. and see how it reads. It's just going to read differently from how they played it, and see how what my players would make of it. But my best friend doesn't want to play ETU because there are no superpowers, and I'll get to that hopefully later in this video. But B, the new girl, has already seen that entire show and knows that entire storyline. So if I ran ETU for them, I would run it as a sequel to that series, one where you absolutely didn't need to watch the show to understand what was going on, but there'd be little Easter eggs for the new girl so that she would, chuckle at the stuff that she remembers from the show, right? Little inside jokes and that kind of stuff. And so I'm never going to get to play to run. I'll never be able to play Degrees of Horror because I already know it. I mean, I guess I could play it if somebody invited me. I would certainly not metagame or anything, but yeah, it's still kind of spoilers. I know what's going to happen, and it would be more of waiting to see when it happens rather than to see what's going to happen, which is, I'm sure as a GM is kind of disappointing for the GM. It would be for me. So, I probably am never going to play, and almost certainly never going to run Degrees of Horror, and I would love to run it. And so this would be a way for me to run it for fictional players and just see how it plays. So if that's of interest, we could try that. Keep in mind, ETU means the player characters do not get superpowers. They don't get any powers. They can do rituals, but they don't get any personal powers of their own power points, and they don't get power points because they're supposed to be normal college kids in a paranormal world. And so, wow, another boss. Okay, let's do that, and this, and that. And there we go. Domination. And you can help me. So, so that's one possibility. Another possibility is Pine Box, Texas, Pine Box Middle School. Pine Box Middle School is basically the Savage Worlds Adventure Edition version of ETU, only it's played with young player characters who are in like 6th to 8th grade instead of being played with college students. It's not necessarily my cup of tea, but I purchased it because I'm going to see if I can get my nephews over Christmas interested in role-playing games by playing Pine Box Middle School with them. I feel like since one of them's in high school and the other one's in middle school, they might actually like that better, playing a middle school character and having him like face supernatural things. I'm pretty sure my 11-year-old nephew would absolutely love that because he loves horror. And one of the examples of like material that they're using to crib from that they talked about, like movies and TV shows and books that it's similar to, one of the options, one of the suggestions was It, and he's never seen the movie It, but he wants to see the movie It. My sister won't let him because she feels like he's going to have nightmares, but I can make sure we don't give him nightmares. But if that's the kind of thing that he likes, I think he might like Pine Box Middle School. But since I have all the material, I can offer that as a potential setting that I could run as well. There's also Holler, which is another one that I keep offering to my players, and one of them seems to be interested in it, but not the rest of them. And so that's another one where I spent all the money on the box set, and I'm probably never going to play it. So ETU with the Degrees of Horror campaign, Holler, and Pine Box Middle School are probably higher on my list than Deadlands. But I would be willing to play Deadlands if the lion's share of people who are interested in this would be interested in seeing that. And it would be the cheapest option because I already have all the Deadlands stuff since I'm using it for my main game. The disadvantage is I'm using it for my main game, and I kind of would like to try something a little different. So I'm not going to promise to do what you guys request, but I will take it under advisement. And let me know what you think you would want to try, you see me try, and I'll think about it. And let me know if you want to watch this sort of thing at all. Right? It may not be interesting to people. It may be the kind of thing where people would say, hey, it was fun to watch as a diversion when you were still posting City of Heroes videos, but instead of City of Heroes, yeah, I'm not interested. And if that's true, please, that's fine. Let me know. Again, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I'm not upset that people didn't want to watch Ark and stuff. That's fine. I don't care. But I don't want to waste the time of... I mean, I might play it anyway without posting it, but I don't want to waste the time of making videos and trying to at least do some sort of decent production quality and everything when there's really no need to do that, right? It's a lot easier for me and a lot easier on my computer if I just play Ark and I don't have to narrate things, right? And I've been, I've gained like 20 levels without making any videos because I don't feel the need to anymore, and it's actually a lot easier. So I don't mind making the videos if people are going to watch them, but if they're not going to watch them, there's sort of no point. So let me know what you think of the possibility of doing sort of solo GMing with Oracle-based, emulated players, and if that's something you folks think you'd want to try, let me know. And if it is something you want to try, then let me know the game and potentially the setting if you have a preference. Again, I'm not going to promise to do what anybody asks, but I will take that stuff all under advisement. The reality is that among all of those things that I have, I'm not entirely sure which one I want to do the most. On the one hand, Degrees of Horror, it's pretty cool, but I also do know how that campaign turns out, or could turn out, and I've never played the Holler one that's in the book, and I've never played the ETU one. I never played the Pine Box one or Pine Box at all. So those are potentially newer, although I really do very much like East Texas University as a setting, and I thought the Degrees of Horror campaign was pretty cool. So anyway, let me know what you think and whether you find this interesting at all, and drop that down in the comments. Now, on to another thing before we get to the thing about advice for GMs. So another thing that I wanted to mention is just talking about my group and what they're up to. Did we miss this guy? Yeah, I guess we did. You see, we miss a lot with the teleport. So talking about what my group is up to, I just want to provide a short update so you guys can understand kind of the context of where I'm coming from and why I would say probably not, Deadlands is probably not at the top of my list. I love Deadlands, but we've been playing Deadlands for a year and a half, and this wasn't something we actually agreed to do for that long, right? Originally what happened is my Roman campaign ended in December of 2022. And I told them it was ending, a month or so before, kind of like now. It's November, and I just told my group, given the fact that you guys they've been actually skipping over a bunch of the content and kind of beelining to the main quest. And I said, it's fine that you want to do that, but you kind of skipped all the way over Act 2. And we went from Act 3, Scene 3 out of 4 to Act 1, Scene 3, skipped Scene 4, skipped all of Act 2, did Act 3, Scene 2, and now we're back in Act 3, Scene 1, because they're not following the order that the book author expected them to follow. We are in a situation now where they're probably 2 encounters and a dramatic task from the end, assuming they continue to beeline the story and ignore all the potential side quests and the rest of that stuff. And so I informed them of this a couple of weeks ago, about a week and a half ago, because we're playing on Saturday. Today's Tuesday, and and I said to them, you guys should think about what it is that you want to do next, right? But originally, when this happened last year, my best friend had been, shall we say, threatening to GM 5th edition D&D for months and months. He had done a little bit when I needed a break. He had done some Candlekeep Mysteries, and he ran that for 6 months. And I think he was very frustrated because he wanted to make it a cool, long, involved, critical role style campaign of the sort that he'd been enjoying watching, and he really wanted to make it awesome, and he wanted it to be like my campaign, right? This big, long, involved thing. And he couldn't do that because it was only 6 months, and some of the stuff he tried to do was a little too ambitious, and he ultimately ended up being very frustrated with that campaign. And so I think he wants to do it better. And so he's been threatening for a long time, okay, when Scrapperlock is done, I will go ahead and run the next campaign. I have some cool ideas. I'm going to create a homebrew world, and we're going to do this really cool thing, and it'll be all about your character backgrounds, because I think what frustrated him about my campaign was mine wasn't really focused on character backgrounds, and the other players I don't think cared, but he wanted it to be more about backgrounds. And so This is the way. By the way, I'm not complaining about this. I've mentioned this before. This is the way campaigns keep getting better and better. He wants to run the game and kind of improve on all the things he feels like maybe I didn't do that well, right? And if he does all the things well that I did well and then improves on it, we'll have an even better campaign than we had when I was running it, right? And then if the next guy takes over and even improves on what my best friend did, it'll be even better. So I have no problem with him doing that. It's fine. I'm perfectly happy for him to do that. But in November, whatever, when I said we're going to be finishing probably around the holidays, he said, "Well, I'm not going to be ready to take over at the beginning of the year." He said, "I'm super busy, and I was probably thinking more along the line. I was really thinking more along the lines of maybe late spring of next year. 4, 5, 6 months." So one of the other guys said, "That's okay. I would like to GM something. I can't run a campaign, but I could do something short, take a break." So he said, it'll be maybe 6 sessions or something like that, which for us is 12 weeks, which is, a good 3, 4 months. So he said, if you want, I can do that. So, and we don't really need the Umber Beast right now, so let's just dismiss him. So we played some Wildmount, and I was a player in Wildmount for 3, 4 months. We did that from like January to April, and then as we were winding down, and he said we've only got a session or two left, we turned to my best friend and said, "Are you going to be ready?" And he said, "I'm not ready yet." And so I said, "Well, I could run something. Do you guys want to try? There's a lot of cool games, and I would like to try something." And I pitched them kind of what I pitched to you guys, right? We could play Deadlands, we could play Holler, we could play a bunch of Savage World settings, or we could play Call of Cthulhu, or we could play Delta Green. Um, what's your interest? And so we talked about it, and what people said they would really like to try was Deadlands. And my best friend surprised me by saying he was interested in it too, because I was sure he didn't like the Old West, but he said, "Yeah, it sounds cool." And he had a character idea that he really wanted to try, which was a gunslinging sorcerer or sorceress, and he was like, "I don't know if I'll ever be able to play that in D&D because a lot of GMs really don't like guns in their fantasy game, and a lot of games that have guns don't have magic." So he said, "This is actually perfect for me, and I could then try this character out and see how she plays." So everybody was on board, and we said we're going to do Coffin Rock, which is a relatively short adventure. I think we got it done in about 6 sessions, 5 sessions, something like that. It's an old school style, like 32-page or so adventure module with a map of the town, a map of the equivalent of like a dungeon, and a villain to fight and stuff like that. So we played that, and as we were getting toward the end of Coffin Rock, I said the same thing, guys. We're getting toward the end of this adventure, and so we should think about what to do next. It was now, June or something, and my best friend said, "I'm sorry, I'm still not ready. Things are really busy at work." So I wasn't able to do any prep work or any world building, and he really wants to do something homebrew. And I've been trying to beg him, look, just use a purchased module. Although I got to tell you, they're a lot of work too. And Hard Head Stone Hill, man, I've had to redo almost everything. It would have been easier to just make up a story myself and use the town. But anyway, he's not ready, and so I said, "Well, what do you guys want to do?" I again said, if we're doing Savage World, whoops, I hit the wrong guys. I then said, if we're doing Savage Worlds, we could do lots of things. It doesn't have to be Deadlands. It can be a whole bunch of different things. I'm going to probably get killed now because I hit the wrong guy. Because of tab targeting, can I hold him? If they're going to surround me, I'll do some of my melee attacks. And of course, everything misses. Can you help me out a little bit? I'm trying to get this boss, but I can't hit him. No, I'm probably going to die. Can we get out of here? Why can't I move? So what they said was we want to keep playing Deadlands, and they decided to play Blood Drive, right? And those of you who are listeners to my channel, you've heard of this stuff before. So they played Blood Drive, and that took us, I don't know, 8 or 10 sessions, and then we played Blood Drive. It took us 8 or 10 sessions, and then we finished that, and we switched to the Hard Headstone Hill, which has taken us another few sessions, another 8 or 10 sessions. And so we're getting to the end of the Hard Headstone Hill, now 2 years since the last campaign I ran ended, and it's the same thing. What do you guys want to do? All right, we're going to have to get domination going because I can't get this guy to stay held. So what do you guys want to do? And what they decided was, and if you're wondering why I didn't pull my pets, it's because I'm busy talking and so I'm not playing well. Man, these guys are such a pain. The hardest thing about this character, I'll get back to my story, but the hardest thing about this character is he just, even now, cannot do enough damage. When I over aggro, I have to keep switching targets or I'll die, right? But then they just stay, and there's no way to focus them down because I have to keep switching targets. If I don't over aggro, he's fine. But if I over aggro, I get into a lot of trouble. Anyway, so we're now in a position where I've said, you know, this is the same thing as 2 years ago. We're winding down the campaign. What do you guys want to do? And I said, here are your options. We can stay in Deadlands with our old characters. We can make up new Deadlands characters. We can do ETU. We can do Holler. We could do, I offered them, I don't think I'm not sure I would do this for solo play, but I could just make up a custom horror game. Didn't tell this would be very Call of Cthulhu-esque in Savage Worlds. We could do Fantasy Companion using the Harn world. I'm not suggesting that for solo play because I'm already running that. But my players are like, yeah, we don't want to do that. We're already doing that in our play-by-post. So we talked about what we wanted to do, and most of them wanted. The first choice for most of them was stay in Deadlands, except the one guy who said, well, he said, first of all, he said, I would love to run something, but I don't have time to GM. But what I'd love to do is get back to D&D. And my best friend said, well, I want to run D&D, but I won't be able to do it yet. I would like to eventually do some homebrew, but it'll be a while, right? Sometime next year. And my guess is he's not going to be able to do it at all. But as we were talking about things, we mentioned ETU, and that's where he said, I'd do ETU if it was superpower, if we could be superheroes in college. And I said, if you want to do that, we could just play champions, right? I offered it. This is the first time I've offered it. I hadn't before because I was like, I don't know if I want to GM champions again. I've done it before. But now that I've spent a year and a half GMing Deadlands and two and a half years or so GMing, wasn't there a guy over here? I thought there was. 2.5 years GMing D&D. I don't mind GMing champions at this point now. Who hit me? I thought there was a guy back there. Oh, those guys. So anyway, it looks like my group's going to continue playing Deadlands for the foreseeable future. I would be very surprised if my best friend is able to GM possibly ever, and certainly within the next year. And I think it's because he's too ambitious, right? He wants to do a homebrew campaign. He wants to build everything from scratch. He wants to design the world around our characters to make the background fit in, right? That's a lot of work. And I think he set himself such a lofty goal that he's never actually going to be able to do it because he's never actually going to be able to make it good enough that he's happy with it, right? So he's made it, it's sort of like, what is it? Perfection is the enemy of good enough, or I can't remember what the old saying is, but the idea if you keep waiting around until it's perfect, it's never going to be done. Right, and if he keeps waiting until the conditions are perfect for his GMing, he's never going to GM. The conditions weren't necessarily perfect for me to GM a number of times during the years I have GM'd, but I've continued doing it, and we've had a lot of fun. So if he really wants to do it, I think he should just say, I'll do it. But yeah, he's waiting for perfection, which means we're probably going to be playing Deadlands for the foreseeable future. And since that's the case, that's why among my offerings I said, Deadlands is my last choice. It's not my last choice of a game. I love it, but I'm already running it for my main group, and I'm probably going to be running it for another year. So I wouldn't mind playing Deadlands, but I don't need to GM another Deadlands game. So anyway, as you're making suggestions, let me know what you want, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'll promise at this point. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, and the reason I'm doing multiple topics here and probably going for a little long, is that I'm only doing one episode per level, so I want you to get your money's worth out of it. So the next topic is 4 D&D GM mistakes you might be you might be making without realizing it, and this comes from the GM Philosopher. That is the name of his YouTube. And so if you want to see the whole video, you can go and watch it. I'm just going to summarize his points, talk about whether I agree or disagree that these are mistakes, and with his solution. So the first mistake is not letting players change the story, not allowing the player choices to have real consequences, both good and bad. This is not a mistake that I make, that I'm generally making. After all, my players, as I said, have skipped over Act 3, Scene 4, and all of Act 2, which is 3 scenes. So 3 or 4, 3 scenes, I think. So they've skipped over 4 of the first 7 scenes. Then they jump to Act 3, Scene 2, and now they're back on Act 3, Scene 1 from the book. Right? I didn't write this. Obviously, this is Hard Headstone Hill. And yeah, they're hopping around, and I'm letting them do it, and it's fine. I don't care. They're having fun. I'm having fun. That's all that matters. Right? So that is not a mistake that I make. I think it often happens when you're running a written adventure that GMs are a little more reluctant to let the players go off the rails, because since you're running a written adventure, you probably don't have a lot of your own made-up stuff, right? You're just using what's in the book, and what's in the book doesn't include anything that's off the rails. Think about how the Hard Headstone Hill, which is a plot point campaign, so it's supposed to be a sandbox and it's supposed to be a plot point campaign. Think about the names. Act 1, Scene, well, it's Episode 1, 2, 3, and 4. Act 2, Episode 1, 2, and 3. Act 3, Episodes 1, 2, and 3, right? It's like it's a play. And literally, if you read through this thing, what you'll see is that the Hard Headstone Hill is a play turned into an adventure novel, or a movie turned into an adventure novel. Turned into an adventure module. And yeah, there really isn't a lot of there isn't a lot of account taken of the idea that the players might do something different. They just assume that all the acts are going to go off in order, and they assume that the players are going to do the things they assume they're going to do. And my players almost never do what the writers of the book assume they're going to do, because the writers of the book assume the players are going to do the most obvious thing. And my players are smart. They often find ways around the most obvious thing, really clever ways around the most obvious thing. The most obvious thing is often the stupid thing that puts your character in danger. Right? And so many times in it, the episode begins with, no matter what the players do, this happens. Every time I see that, I delete it from the file, and I write something else to my other notes to myself saying, well, they might do this. If they do this, this happens. If they don't, well, we'll see. And I'll give myself a list of this might happen, this might happen, this might happen. You're much better off making some sort of a flow chart where do the players do this? Yes, do this scene. No, do that scene. Published adventures don't have that. They don't. And the reason they don't is because they don't want to write 60 pages of material and you're only going to use 15 pages because you're only following that line of the flowchart, right? I mean, in a way, it's kind of efficient because then I could play that game again and go down a different line of the flowchart, potentially. But one of the reasons I think a lot of GMs don't give the players this freedom is, what do I do? Nothing's written in the book. I think a lot of beginning GMs get really screwed up by these books, right? I did this when I was a kid. My best friend did this too. When we wrote our own D&D modules, we wrote them like the modules Gary Gygax and Monty Cook and those guys wrote. We wrote them exactly the same way. And it wasn't until I started running Champions and I was just making these very slim bulleted notes to myself. Okay, the villains are robbing a bank, and here's what they're going to do with the money if they escape. And that's all, right? It's the scenario that we're on. what's awesome about that is you don't have to write a lot of crap to yourself because you made up the adventure, right? And I started realizing, I could do this in a D&D adventure also, right? I don't need to write all the detail in a keyed room that you have in like the Caves of Chaos or the Keep on the Borderlands. And so I started, it was much easier to do this stuff, and if you don't have to write it like it's a published adventure. But when you're starting out, all you have often as an example of how to write adventures are the published adventures. And so you're going to write it like them. Well, if you try to write it like them, then you're doing the same thing. You're writing a play or a movie with acts and scenes, and you're going to want each scene to follow the other scene. You're not going to want the players to skip around. That's not how I wrote the acts. That's not how I wrote the play, right? And after all, Pinnacle Games wrote this thing like a play, so that's the way adventures are supposed to be, right? So I think one of the reasons that the GMs often try to restrict players from doing things that they didn't plan is not that they're trying to control the story directly, right? It's that they're trying to make sure that they don't go off the rails so that they actually know what's going to happen next, right? What happens if you guys go into this barn and nobody's there, right? Because the only thing that they gave me for the game was that you're going to go to the barn in Act 3 when the bad guys have already started a battle in the streets and a bunch of people were hurt, and they're using all the hurt people to make replicants, right? So now when my players go into the barn, well, there are no replicants to be made, right? And so, unfortunately, they're actually drawn in on the dang map. They're not tokens. They're actually drawn in on the artwork on the map in Foundry, which means I'm going to either have to make up my own map or let them be there or whatever, but that's what makes it really difficult, because now the writers told me to do it this way, and you're on the encounter map, but the encounter shouldn't be run that way because we're not at that part of the story, and now I'm confused. Right now, as a GM who's been doing this a long time, it's fine. I have it all set up, right? But that's why GMs are reluctant to let the players go too far off the rails, because then there's like the guardrails are off, right, for the GM, and that's scary, especially for new GMs. So you shouldn't be afraid to let your players improvise, but I think the key, and this is one of the things that, if I do run more Deadlands, I'm going to maybe use their Savage Tales as just scenarios, but I'm just going to use them. I'm going to do the champion scenario method where you just say, this is the scenario, what do you guys want to do? And I don't, and I have in the plan of what the bad guys are doing and what their goal is and why they're doing what they're doing. But I'm not going to have everything sort of planned out in detail, because my players don't do what you plan anyway, so you may as well not. And I think it'll be much easier. So I shouldn't have the problem of my players not allowing my players to go off the rails, because I haven't historically had that as a problem. So that's the first thing, that bit of advice that he gave. Mistakes you're probably making, nope, I'm not making that mistake. We'll get to the next one as soon as we defeat this guy. There we go. Second one, I'm just checking my notes on a notepad, so that's why I had to sort of pause. Bad pacing. So he said this is where you don't leave room for role play. You're not including conversations with NPCs, too many battles back to back, which can lead to shallow gameplay and a lack of depth. And again, this is not a problem my players and I have. In fact, they have a number of times, I'm just marking this elevator so I know which one to go on to continue. A number of times in the Hard Headstone Hill, my players have decided to have done things that have got them out of battles, right? The ranger flashes her badge, and anybody who's afraid to get arrested or whatever isn't going to try and fight a Texas Ranger. So they managed to talk their way out of it. At one point, they were fighting there should have been a battle against Headless Horsemen, and they realized that they could defeat the Headless Horsemen without fighting them by just destroying their anchor to the world, which was literally burning their bodies and their heads together. And so, yeah, they they did that without combat as well, which is a shame because the Headless Horsemen are really tough, and I wanted to see what my group would make of them, and instead they just did it with non-combat. And that's fine with me. I don't care about that. There's been a lot of conversation. In fact, I think in the last like 3 sessions, they've only had a couple of fights. Like the whole last session was all them investigating, and what they spent a lot of time in a barbershop with an evil barber who has been like capturing people using. He's a barber slash dentist, so you go into him for teeth cleaning or whatever, for cavity to get tooth pulled. And what ends up happening is he doses you with laudanum, and then the cult that's working for the dark tree that runs the forest kidnaps you. Can I hit this guy, please? 3 misses. So so they figured out something was going on in this barbershop, and they sent one of the characters in there who's a huckster, and she puppeted him. She mind controlled him. And then she just ordered him to answer her questions, and I said, okay, well, it lasts a certain number of rounds, so what I'm going to do is say you can ask 1 question per round, and then each time you finish the 5 rounds for the duration, if you want, you can spend more power points to increase the duration. They literally, it was 20 questions, right? They asked him about 20 questions, and they found out, like, one of the reasons they were able to skip a lot of stuff is they found out a lot of answers because he knows a lot of what's going on in the cult. And so he told them where the cult was, and they're going to find the cult. But they spent the whole session talking to him, figuring out what to do, then figuring out how to make it so that he wouldn't realize he'd been puppeted. They did a really good job. I mean, they were brilliant. I gave them bennies for it. They were really smart. And at the end of it, I gave them an advance. I said, you guys did a really good job. So they there was no combat at all in that session. And the previous session, I think we had a battle at the beginning of it, and then the rest of it was just a dramatic task or something. So there wasn't any combat in that session either. There's been a lot of sessions where we didn't fight at all, and they've enjoyed it. Because I even talked to them about it. I said, you guys, prefer combat or whatever? And they're like, hey, we don't mind, tricking our way out of combat or whatever. That's kind of cool too. So whatever happens, happens, and just, we don't care. So, yeah, my players have lots of non-combat. I think my game is fairly well paced. And what I will say about the combat is, although my players have never complained, and several times when we had big battles, they were like, we liked it, I've always felt when there's a lot of combat in a session, I feel like it's not well paced, and I'm starting to get bored if it's just combat. So pacing wise, the next what's left to do in the campaign, if they continue to beeline it, is a big giant battle followed by probably some questioning. Then the next session will probably be a dramatic task, and then the final session will be one last big battle. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty good pacing. So I don't think I have that as a problem. Third one is not making full use. So this is sort of specific to the DMG, but not making full use of the Dungeon Master's Guide, planar travel, multiverse, structuring adventures, etc. There's all this stuff in the DM's Guide, and a lot of DMs don't use it. That was me too. I didn't use all the stuff in the DM's Guide because I have my own way of doing things. Right? So I didn't need them to create the plot for me because I already created it. I probably would make more use of it now because I'm more interested in the emergent story and not creating the plot ahead of time. But yeah, not using the full extent of the recommendations and the rules. That's one that I guess I maybe do a little bit. But mostly, no, I read rule books. I like rule books, and I tend to read them a lot. And I read them over and over again. So I tend to know most of the advice that's in the rule books. But if you aren't reading these books and you aren't reading their advice, you definitely could, most of us could benefit from that. And definitely true in Champions, man, they gave such good advice on creating adventures and stuff in the original Champions source books. So yeah, there in D&D, there's like tables for creating villains, and advice for creating villains, advice for creating event-based adventures, advice for creating location-based adventures, random tables for generating the type of location it is, what its origin is, like it's an ancient shrine, and why was it destroyed? It was destroyed by magic, and all this stuff. You can do a lot of. They have a lot of oracles in there, and a lot of tables that you can use, and a lot of good advice on GMing and stuff. And that's true in most games. So it's very important to pay attention to those things. And I would say of these first three of the four, this is one that I'm maybe not doing quite as well. Another boss. Man, there's a lot of bosses in here. I'm going to get killed now if I... Yeah, he's got me sleeping. Nothing I can do until I get out of this thing. Okay, let's get my buddy. And see if we can do something to this guy here. Problem is he's, yeah, he's got me. I'm probably gonna die. Didn't have enough break freeze. Let's get out. I'm gonna abandon my pet, and I'm gonna get out, and I'm gonna have to go back to the base and get some break freeze because I can't beat the bosses without them. So we're gonna head back. It's not a big base, fortunately, and we gotta heal up anyway, so we'll just head out. So in any case, that's the third one, and it's one that I may be a little guilty of. Then number 4, this one I don't agree with. He says one of your mistakes could be that you're not using AI enough. You don't need to use AI to run a D&D game or any other role-playing game. Now, if you want to use it, I have no problem with that, but I don't think that that's a mistake, right? Adventure generation, what I've heard, is that you can ask the AI to generate an adventure for you, but it's going to generate something very shallow and repetitive, and it's not going to be the sort of thing that a GM would create, not even close, right? And so maybe you can get some ideas from it, but it's not going to really generate an adventure. You could use it to generate artwork, but artwork is usually not the squeaky wheel of running a D&D game. It's actually the least issue most of the time. You can use pseudo AI to generate, random dungeons like Donjon and some of these other places. Probably not using real AI, but they're using something like that to generate the dungeons, and so you could possibly use that. We're going to dismiss this guy because it'll be more than 2 minutes before we need him again. So yeah, personally, I don't think using AI is a mistake, and I don't think not using AI is a mistake. Use what you want. Maybe you could say the mistake is not trying it to see if it's worth it, but to me, I've never used AI to generate dungeons or create adventures or run a D&D game or any other kind of role-playing game. So I absolutely don't think I need it, and I don't really plan to use it. And I don't think that's a mistake. That, to me, is not a mistake. That's a matter of taste, right? Most of the other stuff is stuff that is actual mistakes, but this one's just a matter of taste. Okay, so let's sell this. Let's buy a bunch of break freeze. And another luck. And I will pause it here and bring you guys back when we are back with the bad guys. All right, we're back, and I was so busy talking I didn't look at the goal of the mission. Glowies. Found one. Okay, so 2 devices to find. I was like, oh yeah, okay, if I need to find devices, I better run all over the place. So there was one on this map that I figured we'd hit before. I mean, I didn't know there was one, but I figured better check every map. So I checked the one below this. There wasn't anything. And now I'm checking this one just to make sure that I didn't miss a glowy. So anyway, back to AI. Yeah, I mean, I think that if you want to use it, I don't care. Honestly, I don't care whether you use it or not. That's up to each person. And I have no official position on use of AI one way or the other. But I don't think it's a mistake not to use it. I think that AI has its pros and its cons. And not using AI has its pros and its cons. And it's really kind of a pick your poison kind of thing. You do the thing that works for you. right? Just like whether you, because you could say, well, it's a mistake not to use pre-written adventures because it's so much more work to make your own. And I would counter that I have had a beast of a time trying to rip out all of the mistakes in the published adventures and trying to make them usable for myself. Right? Even like a published map. I'm using one in the Harn game right now from Dyson Logos, who makes all these really cool maps. And even in a published map, it's just a map. It didn't have everything exactly the way I wanted it, and I had to make some modifications to it by just not showing them the map and doing theater of the mind. Right? So, okay. So we need our pets. So let's take out the Umber Beast. Let's go ahead and put a break free and this stuff on. Let's surround this guy with haunts. Come on. Let's turn this guy to our side. And then let's see if we can hold the boss. And it's going to take a couple of hits, but that's okay. At least we're a little bit better prepared this time. So yeah, I mean, you could say it's a mistake not to use published adventures, and I would counter that with the published adventures have a lot of issues. And if you don't know what you're doing, it can actually be worse to use a published adventure. And honestly, you know, as cool as some aspects of Horror at Headstone Hill are, I kind of think I would have been better off to just make my own campaign instead of using the published ones. And I'm pretty sure that if we stay with our group, I'm going to be doing my own campaign. We missed again, by the way, with a 95% chance to hit. Or maybe it wasn't 95, but close. So, so yeah, I mean, I may use the adventure seeds in Deadlands Hell on the High Plains. That's just the High Plains states and little like half-page or one-page adventure ideas that you can use. They're like seeds of ideas that you can use to turn into your own adventures. I might do that, or I might use the system in Deadlands for using decks of cards and randomly drawing cards to come up with adventure ideas and that kind of thing. But I'm almost certainly not going to use a plot point campaign again, as you know. The plot point campaigns are supposed to be so much more flexible and less railroady than the written adventures. I don't find them so at all. The ones that I've read, the Flood, which is from Deadlands Reloaded, and Twilight and Hard Headstone Hill, are incredibly inflexible. Right? The plot points happen like whenever X occurs, but X must occur, and if it doesn't, the plot point doesn't happen, at least as written. So, I don't know. Luke Hart has a prep method that he talks about. I'm a little iffy on it. It reminds me of the No Prep GM. What the No Prep GM said is, you know, decide what encounters you want to have when, and just whatever, you know, make up your dungeon in whatever room, you know, the players go down the hallway, and whatever door they open first is the first encounter you wanted to have. And whatever door they open second, and we finish the story arc, is the second encounter you wanted to have. And to me, that's a railroad. You may as well just have one way through the dungeon and only one door you can go through. It's a railroad. And a lot of the plot point campaigns, the two plot point campaigns that I've seen in Pinnacle are basically the same thing. This happens first, then this happens second, then this happens third, and no matter what the players do in between, this one's going to happen next. That's super inflexible. I don't mind the sense of, okay, there's a trigger, and when you do the thing that triggers this plot point, it happens. So like in my Rome game, I had something that the trigger was when they go to C. This encounter is going to happen at C. No matter when they go to C, no matter which port they take to leave, this encounter will happen, right? But they could have gone to C at any point, and they might have never gone to C, and then that encounter wouldn't have happened at all, right? So it didn't have to happen. And even that, you know, I don't know. I feel like you're much better off just coming up with adventure seed ideas and letting the players kind of take you where they want to go. And I'm going to try to do a lot more of that. But anyway, Luke Hart's method was make a 10-room dungeon, right? Or get a map from somewhere. He said do about 10 rooms. That's the best, you know, what he recommends. Then he said come up with a certain number of encounters. I think it was 5 encounters, right? So 1 per 2 rooms. He said come up with 5 encounters, 5 loot drops, and 3 discoveries. And then he said don't put them in the rooms. Instead, have them be basically room independent. And then when the players enter a room, you can randomly roll which ones are in there. Put one or two in each room, and make sure that all 13 of these things are in the 10 rooms. So there's something interesting in every room, but it's not always a combat, it's not always loot, and it's not always a discovery. And so if there's some old moldy book that they need to find that's a discovery that it's got like spells in it or something, you know, and he said you could just make random tables and just randomly choose which encounter goes in the room. You know, it's okay, but I feel like that's also potentially railroady in the sense that if you decide when the encounters happen, then no matter what door I open, it's a boss fight, right? If it's time for the boss fight. And yeah, that's a little railroady to me, too. Um, it's a lot of work to do the published way, which is basically key the whole dungeon out, and then run the encounters of the rooms the players go into, and they may not go into all the rooms. They might go into the room with the boss fight first. But to me, that's part of the freedom, right? You give multiple ways to go around the dungeon. I mean, one of the coolest things we did was the Shrine of the Kuo-toa. I just threw a bunch of Kuo-toa in there. I had patrols. I had what the guards will do if they see somebody. I knew how. I basically programmed how they reacted, and then presented it to the players and let them figure it out. And man, they made a mess of it. They started out really good. They were really stealthy, and then they just started throwing fireballs, and they alerted the whole complex, and the entire thing came down on them. And the only mistake I made running that was once that happened, I should have said, "Okay, guys, let's go off combat, and we're going to do a skill challenge." And you got to it's going to be a hard one. You got to get so many successes before you get 3 failures. And if you fail, you're going to be captured by the Kuo-toa, and you're going to be imprisoned. And I had a way out, right? There were this Svrfnibelin, the little rock gnomes that live underground. I had them. They were able to move through rocks, and they would have like grabbed them and said, "If you hold on to us, we can pull you into the rocks and take you to safety." And then the players would have had to figure out what to do, right? So, or if they could escape on their own, the rock gnomes wouldn't have had to help them, right? And so that to me is a better way to do it. Here's the dungeon. Here's how it's all set up. There's where the patrols are. You figure out what to do. And I think I'm going to do a lot more of that. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Again, in the comments, let me know if you feel like you have any interest in what I began the discussion an hour ago about, which was possibly me doing some solo GMing with oracular players, right? Players being run by oracles. And if so, what game and setting you would be interested in of the ones I've named, right? Please don't ask for champions. I feel like this would be very hard to do in champions. I feel like it'll be much easier to do in something like ETU, but maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. Anyway, until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes. See you at level 34.